You know, usually when we talk about preserving information today, there's this underlying expectation of physical permanence. Like, if you want to save a civilization's knowledge, you just build a massive climate-controlled data center out in the desert.
Right,
That's
exactly. It's totally quantifiable. We put all our faith in tangible hardware, in silicon and titanium.
Yeah, it's comforting. I mean, we desperately want our history, our identities to be locked in an indestructible vault. You back it up on redundant servers, secure it behind biometric locks, and the engineer just points to the blinking lights and says, well, there it is. It's safe.
Right, but it's an illusion of safety.
Exactly, because then you step into the world of ancient history, particularly the history of nomadic empires and conquered nations, and suddenly that server farm is just entirely gone. The titanium vault is crushed.
Yeah, and you're left with nothing.
Right. We're looking at a preservation landscape that relies entirely on the most fragile, ephemeral thing imaginable, which is human memory and breath.
Which is, an incredibly precarious place to store the survival of an entire culture.
Totally. And that fragility and how humanity somehow overcomes it is exactly where we are going today. I mean, think about it. I want you, the listener, to really put yourself in this headspace.
It's a terrifying thought experiment.
It really is. If you were told tomorrow that your entire digital footprint was wiped out, the libraries burned, the servers smashed, and you only had your own biological memory to preserve your family's history, what is the first story you would lock into your brain?
That's the core of it, really.
Because today, we are looking at texts that literally saved entire cultures from being wiped off the map. We are jumping into this incredible comparative study by Dr. Emrah İlik titled Two Cultures, Two Epics, Manas and Shahnameh.
It's a fantastic study. Very thorough.
It really is. And the goal here, the real mission of this deep dive, is to ignite a fierce, unstoppable motivation in you to read. Seriously. To put down the phone, step away from the endless bite-sized scrolling, and look the ultimate testaments to the power of long-form storytelling.
Because we are talking about long form in a way that, frankly, defies modern comprehension. To give you a sense of scale here, Firdevsi's Shahnameh, which is the foundational epic of Iran, is over 60,000 couplets long.
60,000, that's just a massive amount of poetry.
It is. But then you look at the Kyrgyz Manas epic. With all its collected variants, it sits at over 500,000 lines.
Wait, 500,000?
500,000. That makes it roughly 20 times larger than Homer's Iliad and Odyssey combined.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and about 5 times larger than the Shahnameh.
500,000 lines. I mean, if you try to imagine just physically holding that much poetry in a single human mind, it almost sounds like a biological impossibility.
It really does.
It's like trying to download a massive encrypted zip file of an entire civilization directly into your neural pathways. It's got their laws, their geography, their tragedies, all of it. So, okay, let's unpack this. How did these massive stories survive against all odds?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the mechanics of why they were built in the first place.
Yeah.
You have to realize these weren't written by people sitting comfortably in peaceful times looking to draft a fun fantasy novel.
Right, they weren't just world building for a game.
Not at all. These epics are the product of historical pressure cookers. When a society's identity is threatened with total erasure, the most potent weapon they have isn't necessarily a physical sword, it's their stories.
Man, that's powerful.
Let's look at the Shahnameh first. This epic was finalized around the year 1011 by the poet Firdevsi, and he worked on this single text for 35 grueling years.
35 years on one project. I can barely stick to a workout plan for 35 days.
Right. But the catalyst for this obsessive dedication was the Arab conquest of Sassanid Iran in the 7th century. Following the conquest, there was an active, systematic assimilation of Persian culture. Arabic became the language of administration, of religion, of literature.
So they were basically being culturally overwritten.
Exactly. The Persian language, Farsi, was in real danger of being reduced to a mere kitchen dialect, destined to eventually just fade away entirely.
But Firdevsi essentially weaponized poetry to stop that from happening. And what I find so fascinating isn't just that he wrote it, but how he wrote it. Because he didn't just write a good story in Farsi, he actively performed like linguistic archaeology, right?
Precisely. The preservation mechanism wasn't just the narrative.
It was the words themselves.
Yes, the vocabulary itself. Firdevsi intentionally scoured the region for ancient Middle Persian, or Pahlavi, texts and oral histories. He actively and stubbornly refused to use Arabic loanwords wherever possible.
Wow, so he was being super strict about it.
Very. He wanted to prove that Farsi was rich enough, musical enough and structurally sound enough to support high, sophisticated literature.
That is so cool.
And he uses specific rhythmic meter, the mutakrayab, which mirrors the natural cadence of spoken Persian. That made it incredibly catchy and easy to memorize. What's fascinating here is that he essentially built an impenetrable linguistic fortress out of poetry.
And he sacrificed his entire life for this. The source notes he actually died in poverty because the ruler at the time, Mahmud of Ghazni, didn't value the work.
Right. Mahmud wasn't interested in Persian nationalism.
Exactly. But Firdevsi played the longest game imaginable. He died broke. But 1,000 years later, Iranians still speak the language he codified. I mean, that is the superpower of reading and literature. It outlasts empires.
It really does.
And then you have the Manas epic, which is just as mind-blowing because it didn't even have the luxury of being written down for centuries.
Right. The Manas epic survived purely through oral transmission. It was sustained by these master storytellers called Menakes.
And it wasn't just them memorizing a script, right?
No, not at all. And this wasn't just rote memorization. Modern oral formulaic theory, which scholars like Milman Parry and Albert Lord developed when studying epics, explains how this is actually possible.
Okay, lay that on me. How does a human do that?
Well, a Manishi doesn't memorize 500,000 lines word for word. They memorize a vast vocabulary of melodic structures, poetic formulas, and thematic building blocks.
Oh, I see. Like jazz improvisation, but for epic poetry.
That is a perfect analogy. They enter an almost trance-like state, utilizing specific breathing techniques and rhythmic chanting to spontaneously compose and reconstruct the epic in real time before an audience.
That is literally live rendering a civilization's history.
Yes, and they had to do this under immense threat. The source outlines how this epic was heavily suppressed during the Soviet era.
Right, the USSR.
The USSR recognized that Manas embodied the nomadic, fiercely independent spirit of the Kyrgyz people. Suppressing the epic was a calculated move to control the population and absorb them into the Soviet ideological system.
Which makes sense from a totalitarian perspective. If you control the stories, you control the people. And I recall the source mentions the Soviets weren't the first to try this, right?
No, absolutely not. Before the Soviets, it was the Mongols and the Chinese attempting to assimilate or conquer the Kyrgyz tribes. The epic itself explicitly narrates the story of the Kyrgyz people being exiled from their homeland to the Altai Mountains and their subsequent bloody fight to return and reclaim their independence.
It is a literal blueprint for national survival.
Exactly. Folklore in this context acts as preservation through social pressure. The epics become what we call identity tales.
Oh, it makes me think of an airplane's black box.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Like if the geopolitical empire crashes, if the entire civilization is conquered, fragmented, and just scattered to the winds, the epic is that indestructible bright orange flight recorder that future generations dig up to learn who they were.
And where they came from.
Yeah, and how they survived the impact. And because these texts carry the absolute weight of an entire nation's survival on their shoulders, the heroes placed inside them couldn't just be, ordinary guys who were pretty good with the sword.
No, they had to be architectural marvels of human projection.
Right, they had to be superhuman.
The birth of the epic hero is never standard, because the society needed figures who were physically imposing enough to hold back invading armies, but also mentally superior enough to unite fractured tribes.
So it's a lot of pressure on a baby.
A tremendous amount. The birth narratives serve as a profound psychological projection of the nation's trauma and its needs. The hero must be marked from the exact moment of conception.
And the markers they use are so wild. I mean, in Manas, his mother, Shiyirdi, gets pregnant and suddenly develops this intense, uncontrollable craving. But she doesn't crave something normal like pickles or ice cream.
No, she craves a leopard's heart.
A literal leopard's heart. A hunter actually has to go track and kill a leopard just so she can eat its heart.
It's intensely symbolic.
And it doesn't stop there. When Manas is finally born, he doesn't just come out crying like a normal infant. He is born holding a chunk of black blood in his right hand.
Yes, and the lineage of this terrifying imagery continues with his descendants, too. His grandson, Satek, is born holding yellow poison in his hand. Yellow poison?
Wow. Which the text explicitly states is meant to dry the offspring of his enemies.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. I have to push back on this a bit, because if we look at modern storytelling, right? Take superhero origin stories, for example.
Sure.
You get bitten by a radioactive spider, or you're a benevolent alien sent from a dying planet. Even when it's violent, it's usually framed with some inherent nobility. But a baby holding a literal clump of coagulated black blood, or toxic yellow poison meant to eradicate bloodlines.
It's jarring.
And it's incredibly grotesque. It feels horrific for the supposed good guy of the story to enter the world like a biological weapon.
It is deeply disturbing to a modern, comfortable sensibility. But we have to analyze the specific, turbulent environments these stories were forged in. A hero's capacity for extreme violence wasn't seen as a character flaw.
What was it seen as then?
It was recognized as a tragic, necessary shield for the innocent. What you're seeing here is a societal inoculation.
Inoculation, how so? Well, by projecting all their trauma, their fear, and their necessary capacity for violence onto a single mythical infant, the rest of the civilization is allowed to maintain their humanity.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. That clump of black blood symbolizes the horrific burden of war that Manas is born to carry, so his people don't have to. He is born already drenched in the blood of the oppressors.
That is so dark, but so compelling.
The yellow poison Cetek holds is a brutal promise that he will completely eradicate internal traitors and external threats. It isn't malice for the sake of evil. It's a terrifying, absolute form of protection.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. When Genghis Khan's armies are sweeping across the steppe, you don't need a polite diplomat.
No, you need an immovable force of nature.
And the Shahnameh does something similar with physical scale, right? Rustam, the ultimate Persian hero, is so massive in the room that his mother, Rudabi, physically cannot deliver him naturally.
Correct. The situation becomes lethal. Rustam's father, Zal, is forced to summon a mythical giant bird of immense wisdom called the Simurgh.
A giant mythical bird doctor. I love it.
Basically, yeah. The Simurgh advises them to perform a surgical procedure, what we would call a primitive cesarean section, to save the mother and deliver this giant child.
That's wild that they had that in the story.
It is. This procedure actually became known in Persian folklore as the Rostamzad, named directly after this event. And once Rustam is born, he is described as being the size of a 1-year-old child immediately.
That poor mother.
Indeed. To sustain his growth, he requires 10 wet nurses.
10 wet nurses just to keep one infant fed. It instantly establishes that his sheer physical scale operates outside the bounds of normal humanity.
He is larger than life from day one. But physical size and a terrifying birth weren't enough to make a functional hero. Both of these traditions heavily utilize a specific narrative mechanism that the folklorist Lord Raglan identified.
Oh, the Raglan scale. I've heard of this.
Yes, Raglan created a 22-point scale of common narrative threads in global mythology. And one of the most critical is the adoptive shepherd, or the exile trope.
Right. The hero is almost always sent away from home. Like, Manas is described as being so wild, aggressive, and unmanageable that his own family literally cannot control him.
He was a menace.
Total menace. So his father sends him away to the harsh mountains to be raised and disciplined by a shepherd named Osper. And in the Shahnameh, we see a similar thread with a hero named Kihuzrev, who is hidden away with a shepherd on a mountain to protect him from his murderous grandfather, Afrasiab.
Yes, very common pattern.
So why is this such a universal rule? Why can't the hero just grow up in the palace and be trained by royal guards?
Sending the child away to nature is a crucial psychological and political motif. It ensures that the hero builds physical and mental resilience away from the luxury, sycophancy, and softness of the royal court.
Ah, so they don't get spoiled.
Exactly. Think about it on a civilizational scale. It's the ultimate high-stakes outward-bound program. They have to learn the brutal realities of the physical world, connect intimately with the land they are destined to protect, and build radical self-reliance.
Because a hero raised entirely in a palace might become arrogant or detached.
Or just physically soft. A hero raised by shepherds understands the struggles of the common people and the unforgiving nature of the earth.
It completely grounds them. But here is the narrative pivot that I find so brilliant. You build this physically imposing, magically gifted killing machine who understands the harshness of nature, right?
Right.
If that character just marches forward, wins every battle flawlessly, and has no internal friction, they're incredibly boring to read about. A perfect hero cannot sustain the attention of an audience for 1,000 years.
Absolutely not.
For these stories to genuinely motivate human beings, the heroes had to possess deep, agonizing, tragic flaws.
A flawless hero might inspire awe, but a flawed hero inspires empathy. The epic narrative relies heavily on internal structural conflict. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the father-son conflict is a massive recurring theme in both the Kyrgyz and Persian traditions.
It's never just the good guys versus the bad guys.
No, it shifts the story from just fighting external monsters to the clash of generations, the painful struggle for independence, the devastating consequences of rigid duty.
We see this beautifully in the Manas epic. Manas and his father, Jakob, have intense, fiery disagreements over how to lead. At one point, Manas gets so entirely fed up with his father's hoarding of wealth and the lack of vision that he runs away from home.
He basically abdicates his role.
Yeah, he abandons his royal destiny, hides his identity, and becomes a partner with an old farmer just to sow wheat. The greatest warrior in the world walks away to do manual agricultural labor because he can't stand his family dynamics.
It's intensely relatable.
It really is. And his blood brother, Almambet, has a father-son conflict that is even more ideologically severe.
Almambet's narrative arc is incredibly rich. He's originally born a Chinese prince, the son of a powerful, high-ranking commander named Saranduk. But during his travels, Almambet encounters a Kazakh Khan, learns about Islam, and converts.
Which is a huge deal.
A massive deal. This isn't just a personal spiritual shift, it's a profound political rupture. When he returns home and earnestly asks his family to convert alongside him, his father is outraged.
I can imagine.
Saranduk cites absolute loyalty to the religion and traditions of their ancestors. The ideological divide becomes so toxic that the father actually orders his own son to be imprisoned and executed.
His own father orders his death over a difference in worldview. Almambet barely escapes, fleeing his homeland and eventually finding his way to Manas. It's an agonizing story of how rigid belief systems can completely shred family bonds.
These conflicts are a mirror held up to the society itself, reflecting the agonizing transitions between different cultural epochs, from polytheism to monotheism, from nomadic tribalism to centralized states.
That makes perfect sense.
But the absolute zenith of this tragic father-son dynamic, the most heart-wrenching example in perhaps all of global literature, is found in the Shahnameh, in the tragedy of Rustam and Sohrab.
Okay, to the listener out there, if there's one singular reason to go read the Shahnameh, if you want a masterclass in tension and irony, this is it. It's Shakespearean, centuries before Shakespeare. Set this up for us.
The setup is a masterwork of tragic irony. Rustam, the aging, legendary champion of Iran, travels to the city of Samangan and marries a beautiful princess named Tamina. But because of his absolute unyielding duty to the Iranian state, he is forced to leave shortly after the wedding.
Duty always gets in the way.
Always. Before he departs, he gives Tamina a precious, unique amulet. He instructs her, if they have a daughter, put the amulet in her hair. But if they have a son, bind it tightly to his arm so that one day Rustam will be able to recognize his own flesh and blood.
And predictably, she has a son, Sohrab. And this kid grows up to be an absolute titan, inheriting all of his father's terrifying strength.
Yes. Sohrab is raised in the land of Turan, which is the historical blood enemy of Iran. When Sohrab comes of age, he demands a noble warhorse, builds his strength, and sets out with one single goal, which is to find his legendary father.
But he doesn't know what he looks like.
Right. And this is where statecraft and political manipulation intervene. The ruler of Turan, the incredibly cunning Afrasiab, realizes the military asset he has in this boy.
Oh, man. Afrasiab is so evil.
He manipulates Sohrab into leading the entire Turanian army in an invasion against Iran, keeping Sohrab in the dark about who he will face. Afrasiab is secretly hoping that Rustam and Sohrab will meet on the battlefield and annihilate each other.
Removing the two greatest threats to his own power in one stroke, it's Machiavellian brilliance, and it works perfectly.
It does.
The two massive armies meet, and in classic ancient epic fashion, rather than throwing thousands of lives away, the two greatest champions step out into the space between the armies to fight a one-on-one duel. Rustam steps out for Iran, Sohrab steps out for Turan.
Neither man knows who the other is.
Though Sohrab actually suspects it, he looks at the sheer size of the older man and keeps asking, "Tell me your name. I suspect you are Rustam. Are you my father?"
But Rustam is trapped by his own pride and military paranoia. He assumes this young warrior is trying to use psychological warfare or trying to claim the glory of fighting the great Rustam. So he conceals his identity.
A fatal mistake.
He claims to be just an ordinary, unnamed soldier of the Iranian army. And because of that one lie born of pride, the father and son begin to fight. The mechanics of this battle, as Firdevsi writes it, are exhausting just to read.
It goes on forever.
They fight for 3 consecutive days. They swing their heavy maces until the metal bends. They shatter their swords against each other's armor. They break their bows.
Their horses collapse from sheer exhaustion, forcing the two titans to grapple in the dirt, resorting to hand-to-hand wrestling. They brutalize each other until they are literally falling apart.
And finally, on the 3rd day, The veteran experience of Rustam wins out. He manages to grab Sohrab, pins the young man to the earth, and drives a dagger deep into his chest.
It's so hard to hear.
And as Sohrab lies there, bleeding out into the dirt, he looks up at his killer, sighs, and says, "Whoever you are, my father Rustam will find you and avenge me."
Just brutal. The psychological impact of that line is devastating. Rustam freezes. The blood drains from his face. He asks, trembling, why the boy speaks that name.
And Sohrab, with his dying breath, says, "You are Rustam." Wait, no. He says, "You are Rustam. Take off my armor. Look at my arm."
And there, soaked in blood, is the amulet Rustam gave to Tamina decades ago. Rustam tears his clothes, throws dust on his own head, and screams, "Oh, my dear son, the resilient hero. How could I kill you with my own hands?"
It's a scene that destroys you.
It really does. But what elevates this from just a sad story to a profound political critique is what happens next. The sheer agonizing irony of the politics.
Yes, the aftermath is what makes it a masterpiece.
Because Rustam knows there is a magical healing herb kept in the White Palace by his own ruler, Sultan Kikavis, a herb that can cure any mortal wound. So Rustam leaves his dying son in the dirt, rushes to his sultan, and begs on his knees for the herb to save the boy. And the sultan, the man Rustam has bled for his entire life, refuses.
Kikavis refuses out of pure, calculated political jealousy. He analyzes the situation like a cold state operator. He thinks to himself, if the legendary Rustam and this immensely powerful young son unite, their combined strength will easily eclipse my own.
He's threatened by them.
They will undoubtedly overthrow the throne. State survival dictates that the boy must die. So the sultan stalls, makes excuses, and lets the clock run out. Rustam returns to the battlefield only to find his son cold and dead.
This, right here. To the listener, this is why you cannot rely on 15-second summaries to understand history or human nature. When you read this, you feel the betrayal in your chest. It's not just guys hitting each other with swords. It is an intense, agonizing exploration of statecraft versus family.
It's incredibly sophisticated.
The epic is actively teaching us that absolute loyalty to an empire comes at a devastating, soul-crushing personal cost. Rustam's loyalty to Iran overrides his family bonds, and the state repays him by letting his son die. The Shahnameh is glorifying the empire, but simultaneously launching a searing critique of the very power structures that rely on men like Rustam to survive.
Precisely. It prevents the hero from becoming a two-dimensional cartoon. The trauma of the hero serves to reflect the trauma of the nation itself. But, as we look at these men causing these tragic, bloody, ego-driven misunderstandings on the battlefield, we have to shift our focus to the women in these texts.
Yes, we really do.
Because Rustam and Kikavis's tragic miscommunications show just how fragile male ego makes these empires. If the men are constantly tearing the state apart over pride and paranoia, how did these societies survive at all? Who was actually holding the infrastructure together?
That is the perfect question, because the women in these epics completely shatter the modern assumption that ancient stories only featured passive, fragile princesses locked in towers waiting to be rescued.
They are anything but passive.
While the men are out bleeding for glory, the women are often the true strategic masterminds holding the narrative and the logistics of the empire together. In the Manas epic, the portrayal of women is staggering. Manas's wife, Kanaki, isn't just a supporting character. She is an absolute structural pillar of the Kyrgyz nation.
Kanaki is undeniably brilliant. The epic tradition dictates that a true hero cannot simply marry for beauty. He must marry a woman who is his intellectual and strategic equal.
Right, they need a partner.
Manas literally states that he is searching for a woman who will add to my mind. However, when he first travels to marry Kanaki, who is the daughter of a powerful Khan, he acts with the typical arrogance of an undefeated warlord.
He assumes she'll just be swooning over him.
He presumptuously hangs his riding whip on her door, he enters her space, and he eats her food without proper respect.
And she does not tolerate it for a second. When he approaches her too aggressively, expecting her to just fall at his feet, she draws a blade and literally stabs him.
It's quite the introduction.
She stabs the greatest warrior in the known world, and rather than being executed for it, it puts him in his place. It earns his profound respect.
It immediately establishes a dynamic of fierce, unyielding equality. She isn't a prize to be won. She is a political partner demanding to be respected. And her true brilliance shines when the physical brute strength of the men completely fails.
Which happens a lot.
Later in the epic, Manas is betrayed by his own relatives, the Koskimans. They invite him to a feast and lace his food with a deadly poison.
I love the mechanics of this part. Manas, this giant, immovable mountain of warrior, is dying in a tent. The poison is destroying him from the inside, and his enemies are closing in to finish the job. Kaneki doesn't sit by his bed weeping and waiting for the end.
She goes into survival mode.
She takes immediate aggressive action. She throws his massive body onto a horse, essentially kidnaps her own husband from the trap, and rides off into the wilderness to save his life.
And she's the one who cures him.
Yes, she is the one who possesses the advanced medical knowledge to administer the proper antidotes and nurse him back from the brink of death. And later, when the tragedies compound and Manas is ultimately killed in battle, it is Kaneki who ensures the survival of the bloodline. She takes their infant son, Semeti, and flees into exile in Bukhara, navigating hostile territory as a single mother.
We are seeing a reflection of the historical reality that in pre-Islamic Turkic and Persian traditions, women often held immense sociopolitical and logistical power.
It's fascinating.
Kaneki isn't a damsel in distress. She is the architect of the nation's future. She raises Semeti in secret, orchestrating his eventual return to reclaim the throne. She even acts as an architect in the literal sense. After Manas dies, she designs and oversees the construction of the Kumbez of Manas, a magnificent, complex brick mausoleum that requires genuine engineering genius to build, ensuring his legacy is cemented into the physical earth.
Look at her resume. She is a warrior who can draw first blood on Manas, a combat medic, a master political strategist navigating a deadly exile, a single mother raising a king, and a structural engineer. It's unbelievable.
What is fascinating from a literary analysis standpoint is the contradiction embedded within the text itself.
Oh, right, the proverb thing.
Yes. The study points out that occasionally patriarchal motifs and sayings will creep into the narration, likely added over time to appease the male-dominated audiences. For example, one of the warriors confidently states a proverb that a secret should never be given to a woman.
Which is so ridiculous in context.
Exactly. Yet the narrative action of the epic actively and relentlessly contradicts this proverb every single time. Kaneki is repeatedly shown to be the smartest, most reliable, and most forward-thinking person in the room. In the sequel epics, the men who ignore her advice, like her son Semeti, end up walking blindly into fatal traps.
It's as if the storyteller drops in a patriarchal proverb just to tick a box for the men around the campfire, but then spends the next 10 hours singing about how Kaneki's logistical genius saved everyone's lives yet again.
That's very likely what happened.
But, if we pivot back to the Shahnameh, we also see the darker, more destructive side of this immense female political power with a character like Sudaba.
Yes, Sudaba represents the dangerous potential of political influence wielded from within the harem. She is the stepmother of the young, incredibly pure and handsome prince Siavush. Sudaba falls madly, obsessively in love with her stepson.
Which never ends well.
Never. She uses all her influence to isolate him and proposition him. But Siavush is defined by his absolute moral integrity. He respectfully but firmly rejects her advances, stating he could never betray his father, the Sultan. When she is denied, her obsession curdles into pure, vindictive malice.
She realizes she can't have him, so she decides to destroy him. She launches a calculated Machiavellian smear campaign. She tears her own clothes, scratches her face, and publicly accuses Siavush of assaulting her.
And the Sultan, Kikavus, who we already know from the Rustam story, is a deeply flawed, paranoid leader, is caught in the middle.
Right, he doesn't know what to do.
He doesn't know who to believe, his beloved wife or his noble son.
And in ancient judicial systems, when human reasoning fails to discern the truth in a case of he said, she said, they rely on the divine. Siavush is forced to undergo an ordeal, specifically a trial by fire.
A very literal trial by fire.
A massive mountain of wood is constructed, stretching miles across and soaked in black naphtha. It is set ablaze, creating an inferno so hot that the text describes the onlooker's faces blistering from a distance. Siavush must ride his black horse directly through the center of this raging fire. The psychological tension Firdevsi builds here is incredible. The people's blood freezes as they watch their beloved prince disappear into the flames, assuming he's being incinerated.
But because of his absolute purity and innocence, the fire refuses to burn him. He emerges from the other side completely unscathed, his clothes perfectly white, proving his innocence to the entire kingdom.
It is incredibly dramatic. Now, we've covered the harsh historical context, the psychological trauma of the heroes, the agonizing political betrayals, and the vital strategic roles of the women. But to truly understand why these epics survived for 1,000 years, and to motivate the listener to experience them themselves, we have to look at how these cultures coped with their incredibly harsh reality.
We have to talk about the imagination.
Yes, the sheer, unadulterated imagination of their world building. We are talking about magic, beasts, and what is essentially the ancient blueprint for the cinematic universe.
The world building in these texts is staggering. But it is essential to understand that for these ancient cultures, the line dividing objective history and supernatural myth was not a solid, impenetrable wall. It was highly porous.
It blended together.
Where the brutal reality of their existence was too harsh to bear, or where their survival against overwhelming odds was historically inexplicable, myth stepped in to provide a framework of understanding.
Let's start with the metallurgy, the weapons. You think forging a glowing, magical sword in a modern fantasy video game or reading about Valyrian steel is cool? Listen to the sheer industrial effort it takes to make Manas's sword, the Asalmabar.
It's quite the process.
It isn't just hammered out in an afternoon. It takes months of continuous forging. The epic details how they have to cut down entire massive forests just to feed the fires of the forge. They use the hide of an entire ox just to construct the bellows to get the heat high enough. They quench and cool the glowing steel in a poisonous toxic spring.
And then comes the magic part.
And then, this is my absolute favorite detail, they feed the blade dragon's venom for 3 months. 46 master blacksmiths pass out from the toxic fumes just trying to finish this single weapon.
That intense, exaggerated description elevates the weapon from a mere tool of iron and carbon into an artifact of immense mythical weight. It embodies the collective labor and the dangerous magic of the earth itself.
It's so visceral.
And this elevation of the mundane applies heavily to the animals as well. In both the Persian and Kyrgyz epics, the horses are never just pets. And they are certainly never just modes of transportation. They are conscious co-stars.
Right, they're practically main characters.
They have distinct personalities, deep loyalties, and often possess supernatural abilities.
A perfect example is Rustam's horse, Raz, from the Shahnameh. We talked about Rustam earlier, but his horse is a legend in his own right. During one of his grueling quests, Rustam is sleeping deeply in a dark forest, completely exhausted from battle. A massive wild lion catches his scent and approaches the camp, fully intending to eat the sleeping hero.
Now, a normal horse would panic and flee.
Exactly. But Ross doesn't run. He doesn't even bother to wake Rustam up. The horse decides to handle the assassination attempt himself. Ross rears up, fights the lion in hand-to-paw combat, kicks the beast into the air, tears its spine apart with his massive teeth, and then calmly goes back to grazing in the moonlight.
It's such a great scene.
And when Rustam finally wakes up, sees the dead lion, and realizes what happened, he essentially scolds the horse, saying, "Good job, but never do that again without waking me. You could have been killed and I'd be stuck walking."
It highlights a partnership of equals. In the Manas epic, the relationship with the horses, specifically his legendary steed Akula and the fleet-footed Manikar, is equally profound. These horses are explicitly described as having magical properties.
Like what?
They are immune to arrows, and they possess a stamina that completely defies the laws of physics, allowing them to cross entire mountain ranges in a single night. For a nomadic culture, the bond between the warrior and his horse is sacred. It's the fundamental technology of their survival.
And the imagination expands beyond horses into incredible mythical beasts. We already mentioned the Shahnameh has the Semurg, this giant, ancient, iridescent bird that acts almost like a demigod, possessing the wisdom of ages and advising humanity on everything from complex childbirth surgery to wartime strategy.
And the Kyrgyz tradition counters with something entirely unique, the Kumaik.
Tell us about the Kumaik.
The Kumaik is a fascinating intersection of shamanic belief and nomadic hunting culture. It's essentially a legendary supernatural hound, but its origin is bizarre. The myth states that it is born from a vulture's egg.
A dog born from a bird's egg?
Yes. The legend dictates that if a pure-hearted human finds this egg within exactly 7 days of it being laid, it hatches into this noble, incredibly powerful, loyal hunting dog. But if they arrive even a day late, it hatches into a standard carrion-eating vulture.
Timing is everything.
Manas manages to find one of these rare eggs and immediately entrusts it to Kaneki to raise. Understanding its immense value and danger, she rears the beast in a secret, protected ditch located on the 40th floor underground, far away from the eyes of jealous enemies.
The 40th floor underground. The architectural and spatial imagination is just wild. And speaking of ancient beliefs, we also see the deep roots of Tengrism and nature worship with the world tree, the Viterik or aspen tree in the Manas epic.
Yes, the connection to nature is very strong.
When Kaneki is completely destitute, starving, and fleeing through the wilderness with her infant baby to escape the traitors who killed Manas, she doesn't just pray to an abstract concept. She physically leans against and prays to this massive ancient aspen tree that is believed to connect the roots of the underworld to the heavens.
But observing all of these supernatural elements raises an important analytical question. Why inject so much overt magic, so many dragons and shape-shifting hounds, into a text that is fundamentally trying to serve as the actual historical record and genealogy of a real people?
Yeah, that is the paradox. I mean, if Firdevsi and the Manishis are trying to accurately record who their ancestors were so they aren't forgotten by history, why crowd the historical record with dragons, magic potions, and talking horses?
Because the historical reality of their survival was so traumatic and so statistically improbable that it felt magical to the survivors. Consider the Kyrgyz people facing the absolute overwhelming military machine of the Chinese empires, or the devastating sweep of the Mongol hordes, or the Persians facing the sweeping conquests of the Arab armies. When half your tribe is wiped out and you are surviving through brutal winters on the steppes against enemies that outnumber you 10 to 1, your continued existence defies logical explanation.
So the magic is a coping mechanism.
The 40 Sultans in Manas, these invisible spiritual protectors that mysteriously guide and shield the hero in battle, and the weather magic used by Almaktadır to freeze enemy armies, are profound allegories. They are necessary metaphors for the unexplainable resilience, the sheer dumb luck, and the unyielding spiritual fortitude of these nations. When your historical survival makes absolutely no logical sense, human psychology naturally attributes it to the divine and the magical.
So what does this all mean for us today, sitting here with our smartphones and our blinking data centers? I look at this ancient world building and I immediately compare it to our modern obsession with fantasy, your Tolkien's, your George R.R. Martin's, your massive Marvel cinematic universes.
We think we invented it.
We walk around today thinking we invented the concept of the expanded universe with its deep lore and intertwined character arcs. But this exact level of creative genius, this seamless, brilliant intertwining of character psychology, political betrayal, magical systems, and generational continuity existed well over 1,000 years ago.
Long before printing presses.
And it wasn't generated by a room full of Hollywood writers with a massive budget. It was generated entirely by solitary poets dedicating decades of their lives by candlelight or by oral storytellers entering a trance by a campfire, trying to keep their people's memory alive for one more night.
It is a humbling testament to the absolute boundless capacity of human imagination under pressure.
Which brings us back to the core reason we are talking to you today. The goal was to motivate you to read. We've explored how picking up a massive ancient text, like the Manas or the Shahnameh, is not a passive, boring academic activity.
Far from it.
When you sit down and dedicate your attention to these epics, you are actively participating in a millennium-old resistance movement. You're keeping alive the exact stories that people literally bled, starved, and died to protect from erasure.
You are honoring their survival.
You are engaging with complex, deeply flawed human characters, breathtakingly vast world building, and the very real-world stakes that shape the geopolitical borders of the modern world. You are expanding your own mental hard drive.
And I think that leaves us with a final, vital question to consider. We've seen how these massive, sprawling epics functioned as the indestructible biological hard drives that preserved ancient Persian and Kyrgyz identities through brutal wars, falling empires, and centuries of active suppression.
Right.
But preserving those identities required deep, sustained attention, rigorous memorization, and a profound commitment to long-form engagement.
Exactly. They required the audience to sit and listen for days.
So we must ask ourselves, what is our epic today? In an increasingly digital, hyper-accelerated age where our stories, our history, and our attention spans are aggressively fragmented into 15-second video clips, vanishing posts, and algorithmic summaries, are we losing the cognitive capacity to tell and to comprehend the long-form stories?
That's the real fear.
If our digital infrastructure crashes tomorrow and the servers go dark, what is the indestructible narrative recorder that will explain who we are, what we valued, and how we survived to the people living 1,000 years from now?
Wow, that is Man, that is both terrifying and profoundly clarifying. If the real indestructible hard drive of human history isn't made of silicon and titanium, but is constructed out of our deeply held long-form stories, we need to ensure we are still capable of writing and patiently reading the ones that actually matter.
We have to exercise that mental muscle.
The ones that explain the entirety of the human condition, flaws, magic, and all. So, do yourself a favor today. Pick up a book, get completely lost in a massive story, rebuild your attention span. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep diving deep.